Hello, welcome to my channel. A little funny story. As I was going to put the rear reserve Fillmore valve in, I realized that the rear wheel of my Salsa Rustler had a tube in it and it wasn't set up tubeless. So even though that kind of surprised me, it also gives me the opportunity to show you how to take a non-tubeless setup and turn it into a tubeless setup. So what you need is tape, sealant, and obviously I've been talking about these, tubeless valve, and those three things can get you a tubeless setup. Keep in mind you want a rim that is tubeless compatible and you want a tire that is tubeless compatible. So those two things are also a requirement, otherwise it's going to be leaky and things like that are really difficult to set up. So with those things being said, let's go through the steps that it takes to turn this into a tubeless setup. So for this portion of the video, you're not going to see my face at all because I want to be more zoomed in on what I'm doing here. So what I need to do here first is put the tape on, and the idea behind the tape is you need to make this an airtight seal so the air doesn't leak out through the spokes and stuff. The rim strip isn't enough, but what I was told was to leave the rim strip in and put the tape over the top. So I'm going to do that. Hopefully that's the right move. It's what I was told I should do. And then the tape, this is a 35 millimeter rim, so it's a WTB I-35 light or something. KOM Trail I-35 is what it says. So I found out what width tape I need, and they say I need 40 millimeters. So I'm gonna go by what they tell me I should use for this rim. The thing that's weird is the tape is wider than the rim. What I'm being told is that because of the channel and the angles and all of that, the tape's going to go down in and seat in there and pull in and not be up on the edges where the bead is. Well, I guess I'm going to believe them and try this out. So what I'm going to do is start the tape, and when you start the tape you want to start past your valve hole. So you want to start past the valve hole. So what's kind of confusing to me is the tape is all up on the sides and stuff, but you know, I guess that's the way it's going to be, and I just have to accurately place it in there. And then I'm told to stretch it tight, push it down in there. So I'm going to do this all the way around the rim. Okay, so I'm going to overlap where I started. Got a little bit. Now I'm going to cut this. Little scissors. So there we go, I have the tape all the way around, seated in there. Supposedly that's the correct way to do it. Alright, so what I do now is I have to go and cut a hole where this valve is so I can get the valve through there. My first step in doing that is, because I'm going to just put a tube in, I'll show you how this works. I'm going to put a tube in, I'm just going to get a hole enough for the tube press the valve to go through there. Then when I pull the tube out and all of that, we'll go perfect it a little bit for the tubeless valve. So what I do now is I put a tube in there to start. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to really get the tape like pressed in properly. I could probably do it without putting a tube in there, but this is the method I like to do because it will really push the tape in and seal it really well. So I should be able to get, well, the tire seems to be harder to put on because of the tape. Actually just kind of realizing that now. Shouldn't have to use a tire lever. Nope, didn't have to. Now, hopefully this side's a little easier. There we go. Whew. Got a lot of work. Alright. Now, put this little guy on there. Put some air in there. So what this is going to do is the tube is going to expand inside of there, and it's going to really set the tape for me. So that's why I do this. So it's kind of a process, but I feel like you get more reliable setup this way. I'm going to go a little higher because I really want that tape to set. Whew, making noise. Alright, everything's seated well. Go up to like 28. There we go. So, what I do now, let that sit, get this tape to really set in there. So I'm going to let this sit for a while. I'm not sure, 12 hours, 24 hours, we'll see. If I'm wearing different clothes in the next video, you'll know that I waited a day before I finished it. Well, we're back, and as you can see, I'm wearing a different shirt. So yes, I waited almost 24 hours. It's the morning. The next day, I got my coffee here, which is really important. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the tube out of here. That is the next step. One thing I want you to notice is when I let the air out, this is, even though this is a tube, it's still your traditional press the valve. I don't know if you can tell compared to the reserve valve in the other video, if you're watching multiple videos in it. The air is a lot slower coming out of here. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. There we go. There's mostly out. I'm gonna check my camera angle because I don't remember how I had it yesterday, and make sure you can see what I'm doing here before I start taking this stuff off. There we go. I decided to switch up the angle so you can see what I'm doing, and I'll just do this stuff more over here. So I have to break the seat, which is hard. So this is why tubeless rims and tires are important, is because it's actually hard to break the seat free from the rim, and that's what you want actually. So just keep working it. Because that's how it gets its tight seal, so the air doesn't seep out the sides. And as I go, it gets easier. Now it just pops out, now that it's more free. I gotta let a little more air out of the tube. That's the disadvantage of having a tube, is air doesn't come out when you break the seal. You have to actually get it out of the tube. Now, actually, yep. Now, if I was doing a true tubeless setup, I might just leave this one side seated. But because I like testing this reserve Fillmore valve, I want to unseat both sides, because I might as well do the test again for the back tire like I did with the front tire. There we go. Plus I want to take the tire off and show you the tape that I did. Just for the sake of saving my hands, because I'm kind of getting tight, I want to just pop this free with the lever. Get it initially started. Oh, that's tough. Alright, let's get them both done. Okay, so I got one side off. The other side off so I can show you the rim. So there we go. It is taped all the way around, super snug in there. The tape does go up along the sides. I'll probably cut this little bit off, but it's still up under the bead, which is fine. Okay. Well, they asked me to use, or they told me to use this width on this rim, and so I'm curious to know if this will work, even if this is up on the edge here. And then the valve hole, if you look at that, you kind of got to clean that up a little bit. Sometimes I take a what do you call it, a circular file, get in there and kind of clean up around the edges of that to make sure the valve can seat nice and tight. Okay, so there we go. It is taped, should be sealed. Now to install the tire and the Goop after I do a little cleanup here. Okay, so the two tools that I did use to clean this up a little bit is a circular file And I use that to clean up the valve hole so the valve stem can go in there. And then I use this box cutter to go around the edges because there are a couple of places where the tape was coming up onto where the tire seats in, and I don't want the tape up there. I don't actually know if that really matters or not, but to me I feel like the tire will seat better if there's not tape riding up on there. So those are the two things I did to clean up this tape. Again, it's 40 millimeter wide tape and a I-35 rim, which means the inner width of this rim is 35, but that's the width that WTB recommends. This is actually WTB tape also. So there you have it. So let's put the valve in. So this is the little nut or whatever you want to call it. It goes and secures the valve onto the rim. So I'm pushing the valve through the hole and pushing it down in there. And I'm going to take this nut, I take the beveled side, which one is the beveled side? This side, towards the rim. And I'm just going to snug that on there. So I push this down with my finger and tighten the little nut onto the valve as tight as I can get it. And I look around here and, you know, this is rubber. It's pushing against, you know, the tape and the rim, and it should make a really good seal there. If it doesn't, this is the one thing you'll notice right away, and you can always go in, and if I have to file more or whatever, I can do that. But you'll know whether air is leaking out of here or not pretty much right away. So, so the valve is in there, tape is on there, it's ready for the tire. Okay, whenever doing a tire on a rim, you always want the logo lined up with the valve. So I'm going to do that, a little Maxxis logo. I'm just going to pop the tire on there, one side first. So there you go. One side of the tire is on the rim, and the logo is lined up to the valve. So now we're ready to put our sealant in here. I know they tell you a specified amount, so if you want to go get a measuring cup or whatever and do exactly how much they tell you, that's fine. I've put sealant in enough times where I just eyeball it. The way I do it. And so I make sure I shake it up really good because this has sat around, and I have shaken this up recently because I just did the front, but I just want to show you that you should shake this up, make sure that sealant is really well mixed up. It might even say shake on here, and it actually doesn't, but anyway, it doesn't say not to shake it, but like most things, I usually shake them up unless it tells me not to. Now, I'm going to pour sealant into the bottom, and I'm just going to pour some in there, about the right amount that I kind of recall seeing when I actually measured it one time. Then I start putting the tire in. This is the hard part, because you don't want sealant to go everywhere. And yes, there's a barking dog, and yes, I just set the rim in the sealant, so now the rim's got sealant on it. Alright. So I turn this, so now the sealant is on the other side of the tire. So once I get this 180 degrees now, that's kind of the tricky part. So now the sealant's going to be down there, and then I can just go ahead and work to seat the tire like I normally would, knowing it's going to be a little challenging, especially if I don't push it in on this side. So if you're having a hard time seating the tire by hand, it's usually because the opposite side is trying to seat itself, and when it does that, it doesn't give you enough play. And I'm at a point here. Well, in case you are wondering whether I'm like most people and just live in a normal house and have dogs, now you know. What I was gonna say before the dog started barking like crazy is don't ever be ashamed to use tire levers. The thing is, you know, I probably can monkey with this and get it to go on there with my hand by running around, but I have a bunch of sealant in there and I just don't want to spill it around. So I'm gonna use the tire lever. When it's a tubeless setup, you don't have to be that careful. I mean, you don't want to wreck the tape, but you know, and it goes on really easy with the tire lever. So I use these all the time. If you have tubes, you just have to be careful not to pinch the tube while you're using them and stuff like that. So there's people out there that are like hardcore, don't ever use a tire lever, you know, and they work the tire and peel it on and all that stuff. One thing I forgot to check, I do this all the time. I do this all the time after I get my tire installed, is I forget to check which direction the tire needs to be on and to make sure that it's on the correct direction, and I again did not do that. So I'm going to double check and make sure I put this on the correct direction. I have had to take tires off and flip them around so many times because I always forget to check what the direction needs to be. And where does it tell me? Come on, there's got to be a rotation direction on here somewhere. The tire will almost always tell you the rotation direction, and it'll sometimes tell you what it should be for a front and for a rear. Okay, rotation direction. That way. Huh. I don't have to flip it. I got lucky, but I forgot to check that before I installed this. So it's something to try to remember to do. I always forget to check direction. I just throw the tire on, and then sometimes I've even gotten it on the bike and I usually can visually tell that it's not correct once I have it on the bike, and then I'm like, oh crap, and I have to take it all off and flip the tire up. So definitely check the tire direction, because almost all tires nowadays are directional, and they are one direction for the front, a different direction for the rear sometimes, not always, so always check that. But I got lucky this time. Tire's the correct direction. It's ready for air. Okay, we are going to put air in it, and again I'm going to use my standard pump to kind of test this reserve Fillmore valve. Couple of things here. I've taken tubeless tires off and on quite a bit over the last few years, put sealant in them and everything, but taping the rim, this is really only the second time I've ever had to do it. So, and this time, the first time I did it, I didn't use the width they recommended. I actually went narrower, and it worked fine. And that was on my low side. So I set my low side up tubeless, and there was some trial and error because I tried to just hand do it without doing the little tube trick, wait 24 hours thing that I just showed you. So I'm curious to know, now that I've done this kind of officially the way you're supposed to, is it gonna work? And here's the true test of whether it's gonna work or not. So we have the valve in there. This is that new Fillmore valve. Standard pump. I hear air leaking. That's not a good sign. Oh, it stopped leaking. Oh, jeez. Oh, so maybe it was only leaking through the tire. I thought it was leaking through my tape or something. Okay, everything's seating now. So this is seems to be working. And it's working with a normal, regular, low volume pump, which I'm surprised. So we're gonna go to my normal 24. And check this, put the cap on there. So at this moment, it is holding air. Now, whether it holds air over the long haul, I don't know yet. I'm gonna say yes, it will hold air, because that tape job was really solid. Dogs. Now I'm just kind of moving it around to kind of get the sealant to go around. So I'm going to install this back on the bike and wait a little bit to see if it actually holds. I don't need to show you how to install a wheel on a bike and so on and so forth, but that's basically how you do a tubeless setup if you have a non-tubeless wheel. So that taping part is kind of key to the whole thing. I'm impressed with the reserve Fillmore valves. So both of these setups, one basically a brand new tubeless setup with an almost brand new tire, and it's set just fine with just your everyday low volume pump. So that's impressive, because the air compressor here is there for a reason. It is. I bought that simply because of tubeless tires, and fat bikes are the really big challenge to seat and make tubeless. But these are 2.6 tires. That's a big tire, and it had, so a lot of volume is basically what that amounts to, and it worked just fine. So I'm impressed. All right, so there you have it. I really hope you learned something in this video. Setting up tubeless tires is not something people do all that often. And I've been lucky sometimes and had bikes that the tape is already in the rim, and that's kind of nice. So we'll see. A couple of things I did there that somebody told me that I can do is I did leave the original narrow rim strip, because it's narrow. If it was wider, you can't leave it in there, especially if it goes all the way to the outside. But this particular rim strip was a WTB rim strip. It only was in the very center channel and covered the valves, and then, or the valves, the spoke nipples and spoke holes, and then it had quite a bit of rim for the tape to adhere to on each side. So I was told I could leave that rim strip in there. The nice thing about leaving the rim strip in there is it does protect the tape from getting any kind of cuts in it or anything from the rim holes, because sometimes those rim holes can be a little rough on the edges and stuff. So that was one thing that I did that I didn't think I would normally do, but I did it because like the guy at the bike shop told me I can do it that way. And wider tape than what I thought I needed to use. 40 millimeter in a 35 inner width rim. And it seems to have worked. I just had to cut a little bit of excess off. I mean, if you're super meticulous when you're putting it around and making absolutely sure it's perfectly centered, but that's really hard to do. So I just put it in there, and then I took the box cutter and took off any excess that was up on the sides. So just in that amount of time, it's holding air. So, and will it hold air for a few days? I mean, that's generally the thing. Is I have some tubeless tires they'll hold air for a week, and I go and check, and there's hardly any air pressure that's leaked out of it. And there's some other ones I've had where after 3 days or so they start getting pretty soft. So that kind of varies sometimes, but this front wheel holds really well, and the rear wheel we'll find out to see how well I did. So that's a reminder to you, whether you run tubes or not. My reminder to you is check your tire pressure before every single ride. And if you're riding with me on a group ride and you don't do that, and you get a flat or you burp your tire because you had too low a pressure, I'm going to be frustrated with you, because I'm like, I've had it happen, and it's really frustrating. It's like, why do you just not check your air pressure before you ride? It takes 2 seconds. Bring a pump with you, check it, or do it before you leave home if you don't want to bring a pump, whatever. Before every ride, check your air pressure, and you should be fine. You should never really have an issue. Where I see people have issues is their pressure is too low, and that's it. And you definitely don't want to overinflate. That's also a bad idea. Okay, I'm babbling on, but I usually do, but I like to give all these little things at the end of my video that for you to kind of be aware of and watch out for. I really appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace. Okay, so before you go, I just want you to see what I'm going to work on next. I'm going to install these brand new Dior XT brakes on my bike. And what's cool about this is I've never done hydraulic brakes myself before. I've always had somebody else do them. So you will get to experience my first time ever installing hydraulic brakes. And we can go through lessons learned together if you want to look at it that way. So that's how I like to do things. I like to learn this stuff and do things like anybody else, and I like to put that on my channel so others can see what do I have to go through to learn stuff. Similar to how I just put the tape on this rim, and I'm not that experienced with it. So awesome.